Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our City Hall. Haven't seen you for a while. So it's good to have some people here, and we've also got some participants who are online as well. So with that, may I have a motion on the minutes? Any discussion? All those in favor, opposed, carried. And Madam Clerk, any agenda additions or deletions?
Yes, Your Worship. We have one agenda correction on CNCL 8.9 in the bylaws section. The first two bylaws are noted as zoning bylaws, and in fact, they're OCP amendment bylaws. It's 10136 and 10137.
All right, may I have a motion on the agenda with that change? Any discussion? All those in favor, opposed, carried. All right, so we're going to resolve, we'll have a motion to resolve in a committee of the whole to hear delegations on agenda items. All those in favor, opposed, carried. So now we go to the portion of the agenda where we hear from delegations. So let me just refresh you on what the rules are for the delegations. We do have 3 delegations who have they signed up. They let us know, they pre-registered that they want to delegate. And so we will go to them first. Now, these delegations have to be on reports, items on the agenda, not anything else. So I will go to them first, and then we'll see who here also wants to speak to us. Now, just for the sake of completeness, there's one delegation near the end of the agenda where we allow people to delegate on anything that's kind of on their mind with, that pertains to civic government. And we have one person sign up for that. You have to sign up the week before. So if you're interested in doing that at any time, make sure that you let the clerk know. There's a procedure. It's not onerous, just an email will do it, that kind of thing. So we'll get to those people or that person in due course. So we're now in committee, so we'll hear the delegations that have signed up. The first delegation is Jasmine Piao. Is Jasmine here? Please come forward, ma'am. Have a seat. And for all the delegations, when you come forward, we'll recognize who the delegate, please have a seat. We'll recognize who the delegation is going to be. We ask that you introduce yourself, name and address, and tell us the item on the agenda that you wish to speak to. So, ma'am, and your time limit for the delegation is 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Jasmine. I am a Richmond resident. My postal code is V6X3W2.
Jasmine Piao.
Yes. I will be speaking on agenda number 7. So with the appointment of the 22 election officers on today's agenda, I am urging the council to ensure appointed election officers will make voting accessibility an utmost priority. I had the opportunity during the 2021 Richmond by-election to communicate with election officers at the time, Chief Elections Officer Claudia Jensen and Deputy Elections Officer Matthew O'Halloran, regarding voting accessibility issues that was experienced by my family. So to give context to my comments, I will briefly share the lived experience of what my family went through with election staff at the Richmond by-election in May 2021 and how inaccessibility to in-person voting has affected my family. So under the leadership of the chief and deputy election officers, election staff were instructed not to accommodate my mother and brother to enter the voting station due to their legal mask exemptions, which are based on medical conditions and disability. My mother and I informed the election staff and elections officers about the exemption provisions in the provincial mask order number MO012 under section 4B. We also educated the staff using guidance from the BC Human Rights Commissioner and the city mask exemption policy. We educated the staff with all the relevant documents. However, election staff were unclear about the mask policy, refused to accommodate the legal mask exemptions, and insisted on curbside voting. Curbside voting involved the voter marking the ballot and handing the ballot to the election staff to submit on the voter's behalf. So my mother and brother were only permitted to see their vote be submitted outside the polling station by the door, and I watched my mother and brother be discriminated, excluded, and essentially segregated from in-person voting, while I saw other residents walk in to vote in the voting station to fully experience and participate in person in the elections. So I just want to express how it was very difficult to see that and to witness the Richmond's election staff essentially discriminate my mother and brother and refuse to follow the mask exemption guidelines that were provided in the provincial mask order and the city's mask exemption guidelines. After dialogue with the deputy chief elections officer and the chief elections officer, the elections officers were not concerned with legality in how the mask exemptions in the provincial mask order were made void during the Richmond by-election. The chief elections officer notified me that there were stricter safety protocols in regards to masks for the by-election. However, this directly contradicts the exemptions provided under Section 4B in the provincial mask order at the time. So I followed up by submitting a BC Human Rights Tribunal complaint against the City of Richmond after this discrimination incident in the by-election, which is currently waiting in queue for processing. So entry to the voting station was denied on the basis of disability, so that violates the provincial ministerial order that I mentioned, the BC Human Rights Code, and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Given that the 2022 general election will be this October, it is paramount that the council appoints election officers who will safeguard and respect the fundamental human rights of citizens to fully participate in society according to the BC Human Rights Code and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms in light of any health and safety protocols, if any. So I call upon the council to ensure that the appointed election officers will review existing voting accessibility policies, educate election staff and residents on inclusive and accessible voting, and implement policies that respect and uphold the voting rights of all Richmond residents. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, ma'am. No. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Well, excuse you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a long tradition in this City Hall chamber. We don't have applause. This is not a theater production. This is a very serious City Council situation. And this delegation, for instance, has brought very compelling concerns to our attention. And I'm sure that the Chief Election Officer, who is our City Clerk, will be taking that into account and will make sure that it gets addressed. Please, no applause and no other demonstration if you don't agree with the people who are there. All right. Sorry? What is that? Okay, we got a question for the delegation.
Okay. Now, I think you raised a very crucial point about participation in the election. Now, I know that before our by-election, there was a provincial election. So I just want to know if your family experienced similar things. You know, I don't know at that time, was there any obstacles for your family members to participate in the voting in the provincial election?
If I'm recalling provincial election, I think there was mail-in ballot option. So that was for provincial election. But I will comment on the federal election in September 2021 when we went in person. There were no issues with mass exemptions.
Okay.
My brother and mother were able to fully participate in person with no questions asked. So I think that also shows there's discrepancy in what occurred.
Good, thank you. Yeah.
Madam, please note that for the by-election, there was also a mail-in option. So, thank you very much, ma'am. The next speaker is Catherine McCreary. Speaking on number 10, as I understand.
Yep, correct.
Please introduce yourself.
Okay. Hello, good evening. My name is Catherine McCreary, and I reside at 1316 West 11th Avenue in Vancouver. I'm here to speak on item number 10, which is revolving around the 13 affordable units provided on 8131 Westminster Highway. So I'll start. Okay, good evening, Mayor and councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I spoke at last Tuesday's Planning Committee, and I have some additional concerns to express. For instance, when applying for a lemur unit or low-end market rental unit, it is my understanding from reading the City of Richmond Affordable Housing Strategy that an eligible tenant is to contact each property manager, in this case, or the possible owner, in this case, directly. I would like to ask that the City of Richmond keep a waiting list for lemur units and a centralized registry as a part of a mechanism to ensure fair, equitable, and inclusive access, not only for these 13 lemur units secured at 8131 Westminster Highway, but also for all lemur units available to eligible tenants in Richmond. Perhaps property managers and/or owners of lemur units could draw from their tenants from an eligible tenant list that the City of Richmond maintains so that lemur units can be allocated on a first-come, first-served basis. This particular housing agreement for 8131 Westminster Highway states that the owner can have relatives of the owner occupy a lemur unit. I think it would be appropriate that they too would have to go through a waiting list process so that relatives and friends of owners are not getting first dibs, and to safeguard the equitable distribution of these units in the community. Lastly, I would like to draw your attention again to PLN 96. It's a table that is part of the stat declaration. If this table was constructed by design, I think it should be reviewed once again because there is, for example, a column for move-in, move-out fees collected and other fees for that matter when the housing agreement clearly states that move-in, move-out fees will not be charged to lemur tenants. Is it legal to be asking if someone is charging these fees that are stated elsewhere in the legal agreement to be prohibited? In conclusion, please consider revamping the lemur unit program and consider revising the housing agreement for future use to address some of the concerns that I have presented. Thank you very much.
Okay, so staff has heard your comments, and we'll ask them to take them under advisement when we're drafting future housing agreements. We have a question. This is a question of the delegation from Councillor Day.
Yeah, you made some really good points when you came to the planning committee, and when I look at the chart, you're right. The stuff that's on there is simply stuff we're not supposed to be charging for. So I can't thank you enough for bringing that to our attention. Did you by any chance look at any other cities to see if they had like different formulas that were better than what we're doing here in Richmond?
I didn't really do a survey, but I just would say like the BC Housing Society or BC Housing, as you present in your affordable housing market strategy, already has a like process online. You know, you fill in obtain and fill a paper application, and so you state that. And so maybe the City of Richmond consider something similar, but I'm not sure what other cities do.
So we'll ask questions of staff later, Mayor Brody? Or do you want
Yes, during the agenda, yeah.
Yeah. So not now.
All right, thank you very much, ma'am. Not now. All right, the third one that we were advised about is Dee Whalen, who I believe is online. There she is. Ms. Whalen, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to be here in person, but my husband gave me COVID, so here I am. I've lived in Richmond for many years, since 1975, and I've seen lots of changes in the city that I love since then, especially the development of high-cost condo housing. I'd like to speak tonight on items 10, 11, and 12, as I see them all connected. I commend the excellent work of the city staff on these reports. The child care strategy and the senior strategy both lay a framework for the future. However, they both depend on the provision of rental housing, because seniors and families are two prominent groups that are part of the well-reported 20% of Richmond residents experiencing poverty. A glaring omission from both strategies is a recommendation that recognizes the need for housing that both seniors and families can afford. The city's housing needs report in 2021 states that 94% of housing builds in the last 30 years have been condos and houses, over 46,000 dwellings. Only 6%, or about 2,800, have been rentals. This outcome is exacerbated by the city's affordable housing strategy, which is developer-driven and depends on developers providing low-end market rentals, or LEMR, in return for additional density and relief from development cost charges. Item number 10 is in line with the affordable housing strategy, which mandates 10 or 15% of units in developments over 60 units are LEMR. Once built and tenanted, LEMR units have maximum incomes and maximum rents. I pause to say this is good policy. It connects rent to the unit, not to the tenant. The Residential Tenancy Act does not have these guarantees, so I congratulate the city on establishing those maximum rents and maximum incomes. Other than the policy, however, the LEMR program is a black box, and the public deserves to know how the program works. For instance, how units are tenanted and re-tenanted, what criteria are used, how is the public assured that units are rented to people who need them, and how often are developers and operators' reports inspected. Having said that, no city should be totally dependent on private interest to provide the housing that our community sorely needs. This community should be welcoming seniors, families, newcomers, single parents, people with disabilities, low-wage workers who want to come, stay, live here, work here. For any city to remain a vibrant and thriving community, it needs a variety of incomes, not just people who can afford million-dollar condos. Service workers on minimum wage cannot afford to live here. Young professionals who grew up here can't afford to stay. Even first responders are finding it difficult to find housing they can afford. Richmond deserves better. There have been no non-market rentals built for at least 5 years. With the burgeoning seniors population and with more newcomer families moving here, non-market housing is the only thing that makes sense. Federal and provincial funding is available. Why is City Council not prioritizing the construction of non-market housing? Seniors and families needing childcare also need housing they can afford. These vulnerable groups are more likely to visit the food bank and to seek out free community meals than other residents. The food bank reports that they receive over 2,000 clients a week. The food bank also reports that at least one-third of their clients are children, and about 52% of their households are living in market rental. In conclusion, I would make recommendations to City Council to do two things. Number one, pursue and secure federal and provincial funding sources to develop non-market housing using city-owned land. And two, order a full LEMR review and develop a housing registry and waiting list for all LEMR units. As I hope you can see, housing, seniors, and childcare are closely connected. Seniors and childcare strategies are just reports sitting on its shelf if there's nowhere for ordinary people to live. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So we'll go, are there any parties here who wish to address council on an item on the agenda? Anybody here? You would like to be, okay, come forward, sir. Have a seat, introduce yourself, and tell us the item on the agenda that you wish to address.
Will do, thank you. Just one moment, please. Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is David Yang, and my postal code is V6Y2G2. Before I begin, I'd like to recognize that I'm speaking to you today from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Kwantlen, and Tsawwassen First Nations. I'm very thankful for their history on this land. I've lived in the city center
Sir,
neighborhood.
what item are you going to address?
I will get to that, Mr. Mayor.
No,
item-
sir, you tell us first, okay?
Item number 10, the
Thank you.
8131
Carry on.
development on Westminster Highway. So I've lived in the city center neighborhood for more than 15 years, and I've seen the changes around this neighborhood firsthand. While it is great to see more affordable units built in the city, the scale at which they are being built in the city is simply not good enough. On this site, we got a 14-story apartment, which is predominantly market condos, 134 market condos with only 13 affordable units. I believe this is a failure of the city's bargaining process to secure more affordable units. Why isn't the city bargaining for more, given that affordable housing contribution rates are now at 15% rather than the 10%? To say that this complies with the old contribution rate is simply not good enough, given that we are in an affordability crisis. Here's what they have done in Burnaby, City of Burnaby's newest affordable housing unit development. They got 125 affordable units in a development that's got over 400 units with only 324 market units. That's a contribution rate of 27.8%. It's the situation now that we are in, it's sort of like Tom Hanks in the movie Castaway, when he's stranded on a deserted island. And instead of finding food or basic necessities for survival, all he gets is Wilson the volleyball. That's where most renters and average residents in the city are facing right now. We're not getting substantial help in time of crisis. Now, what about the market units? The market condos for sale at this development will be far from affordable. I'll give you an example. Across the street from this site, there's a 2-bed condo that's built in 2010. Guess what the going price is at? It's going for $989,000. That is no way affordable for the average resident. The city center area should be built with more variety of residential unit types fit for all different income levels, including co-ops, non-market rentals, and social housing. And not just built with predominantly market condos. We certainly need to do better moving forward. And despite all these shortcomings, some will say that this project is good enough. It complies with the OCP, the official community plan. The problem is the last major OCP update was made in 2012. It is grossly insufficient for the needs of the communities today. We have so many issues to address, including proper density, single detached zoning in the city, which is still a majority of the land here, and parking, just to name a few. Using the OCP from 2012 to address the affordability crisis today is like tackling climate change, the climate crisis that we are in right now, using Kyoto Protocol targets from the 1990s. And since this council likes to quote Minister David Eby, the Minister for Housing, I'd just like to share a few quotes from his mandate letter. Quote, "To make life more affordable for renters, particularly during the hardships caused by COVID-19. End quote. Here's another one. Quote, "Deliver more affordable housing through housing hub partnerships by providing additional low-cost loans, expanding partnerships with nonprofit and co-op housing providers to acquire and reserve more rental housing." End quote. So yes, we do need more supply in this city. But supply for who is the question I would ask all of you. Rental supply? Social housing? Co-ops? Or are we sticking with the status quo in here, in Richmond here, which is predominantly market-based condos, luxury condos, and market townhouses? The choice is clear. The average resident needs more affordable and an accessible supply. And to members of council, please do not use the word affordability crisis if at the same time you believe in the same status quo policy prescriptions that brought us to this crisis in the first place. According to the report made by the City of Richmond, this very institution, 95% of residents cannot afford a house, 80% can't afford anything at all. I think I speak for most young people who grew up here in Richmond that our outlook to stay in the city and live in the city is not looking good at all. Young people in the city, as well as working families, seniors, are at a crossroads with this affordability crisis. And at this critical juncture, with no end in sight and rising housing costs, homelessness, and growing inequality, policymakers and decision makers simply have to step up big time, or they need to step down. With that, I'd like to thank you all for the time tonight to present here. It's been a great night of civic engagement, I'm sure, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Councillor Day.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yang. So if you were sitting in these seats, you know it's taken us a long time to get to this place. You know, a lot has been built in the last 20 years, and we have fallen behind on rental. Would you rather see projects held back and left for maybe, 5 years or maybe longer in order to achieve the goals that you just mentioned? Or do you think that moving forward, something's better than nothing?
Through the chair to the councillor, first of all, thank you for your question. I think that's a very important point to raise with respect to policy making at the municipal level. I know we're not supposed to talk about any other agenda items, but for far too long.
Sir, you're on the one agenda item.
I understand, Mr. Mayor, and I clarified
Please
that,
limit
but
yourself.
I'm trying to answer the question posed by
No,
the
limit
councillor.
yourself. You're talking about one item.
Absolutely. So, to your question, councillor, I believe that we are at a critical juncture. And like I said, we are at a crossroads. I have so many friends that grew up in the city, heart and soul, have poured their volunteerism, spent their time doing community work, and at the end of the day, they have to pack up, drive out of the city, and move to, I don't know, Pitt Meadows or something. I think that's quite a shame that young people and working families can't afford to stay in this city because of poor policy making. And so with that backdrop, and this context, I believe what the City of Richmond should do, and indeed all municipal government should do, is to get it right. I think we'd rather spend time to get this right and get it over with for once and for all than to kick and drag ourselves with every project and debating whether or not this is suitable for our communities and if this is going to improve affordability. I think the due course of action from a policy standpoint is really to get what we need right on the table so we don't have to go back and forth in lengthy debates and lengthy proceedings and really just, I think that way we could really reduce the legislative time lag here. And of course, there's legislative time lags on all levels of government. But it is important to get it right and have the stability moving forward so then folks, whether those looking for rental units or those developing rental units, have a good sense of what is expected from this, from our municipal governments. And I would add that these requirements and these policies have to be in line with what we are seeing with this affordability crisis.
All right.
For
Thank you very
15
much,
minutes-
sir. Sir,
15 minutes.
I think you, sir.
Sorry, it's 50% is
Sir,
clearly
you
not
have
enough.
addressed the
So I'll leave it at
question.
that. Thank you.
You have addressed the question. Thank you very much. Who else would like to speak to council? Yes, sir. And just so I have an idea who else is looking to address council on an item on the agenda. Okay, we'll go to you, and after that, anyone else? Okay, so we'll have this gentleman, that gentleman. Yes, sir.
Evening. My name is Evan Dunphy. I live at 6655 Linus Lane. I'd like to speak tonight on agenda item 16, I believe, the rezoning at Blundell and 2 Road. The 6 single-family homes becoming 25 townhomes. This is right by the grocery store that I walk to a few times a week. So I've seen the signs up. I've been eagerly awaiting this to come up to planning committee and to come up to council and see where it's taken and what's done with it. I wasn't planning to speak tonight, and then I pulled up the agenda and saw that there was a councillor who voted against this proposal, and I was like a little bit confused, a little bit taken aback, and I thought, okay, I need to go watch the planning meeting, figure out why we voted against this, because unfortunately this particular councillor has in the past voted against mixed-use, 2-story developments in Steveston because of shadows, and I was fairly worried that that might be the case here. But I gotta say, I watched the planning committee meeting and I was filled with a lot of inspiration, actually. I was really, really happy to see everyone that attended that meeting from council agreed on one thing. And that was so great to see. 25 townhomes on this arterial in this location is not enough density. Every single one of you, starting with Harold Steves, saying there should be 6 floors. And each one of you went on to agree that that's the density that we should be building. It was so great to see that acknowledgement from each and every one of you that we need more density. Obviously, where we're at right now, your hands are a bit tied. Our OCP only allows for a FAR of 0.7. This proposal is an FAR of 0.7. Going through a OCP amendment to change that, to change our arterial road use policy, is going to take years. We don't have years. So the grand bargain is to accept these 25 townhomes. That's what I think council will do tonight and move that forward, and I think that's fine. But there are thousands and thousands and thousands of more lots throughout this city that have potential to be added density. 25 townhomes. First of all, let's address the fact that all we can build on our arterials is townhomes. Townhomes that aren't accessible to people with mobility issues. We can't build anything else, anywhere outside of our city center that isn't a building with stairs. That is a ginormous policy failure. And this council has to own that policy failure because the arterial road use policy was put in place and we follow it, and we have our OCP from 2012, not specifically this council, but members who were on previous councils that put that in place. But we have a chance to go forward now. We have a chance to look at our OCP, amend it. We've acknowledged, you've acknowledged, council's acknowledged, we're in a climate crisis, we're in a housing crisis. And so I really just want to take that moment to remind all of you that you agree that we need more density. You're all in agreement on that. So I know that we get bogged down in these city center towers and big density in city center. There's a whole big city outside the city center that is losing population in every single neighborhood because we don't allow anything other than a single family home to be built on the majority of our lots. You can change that. You can move forward to right that wrong. The other thing I want to address from the Blundell and 2 Road development, this didn't come up in planning committee and it disappointed me. 25 townhomes, 55 parking spots. Not one of you said, is that too big of a requirement? Do we really need to be allowing 55 parking spots? For how many more apartments or townhomes could have been built if people only wanted 1 car? They're right next to a bus loop. They're right across the street from a grocery store. 15-minute walk to high schools, elementary schools. Not every single one of those townhomes is going to have 2 cars, yet every single owner of those townhomes is going to be paying for 2 parking spots. That hurts affordability. That makes those units more expensive. So, in conclusion, please, please, please move forward on this new OCP. Get the density we need for Richmond in all of our neighborhoods so that we can have a thriving, walkable, climate resilient, amazing city. Thank you so much.
Now, you're aware that we are at the early stage of revising the OCP.
Absolutely, and most of my talking tonight is just to remind you of where you agree and to work together on those things that you agree on.
Fair enough. Thank you. Thank you. This gentleman over here. Yes, sir.
Right. Good evening. My name is Mark Lee. I am at V6Y4K8 in Richmond, and I'm going to be talking to item number 10. Basically, I'm going to try and keep it short and sweet. My whole point for tonight is just to say that every development that comes across your desk is an opportunity to reflect on what's being done right and what's not being done right. I understand that this development permit, it was approved before we increased to 15%, but here we are, and so I think there's still the opportunity to reflect on that, and so I just wanted to provide a couple of numbers, just really simple, straightforward numbers. With the building having a total of 134 units, and we're getting 13 affordable in Richmond. If the same building were built in another municipality, how many units of affordable housing would they be getting? For example, in Burnaby, if we just throw out a 20%, then they would be getting 26 affordable units. If we were in Vancouver, they would be getting 26 plus 13 of kind of this in-between affordable and market. And that's based on what we're getting right now. Even if this development was bringing in 15% affordable units, that would be 20. So it would still be less, and it would still be a just kind of embarrassing difference between Richmond and other municipalities that are doing, aren't even necessarily doing a great job at affordability. I moved here from Vancouver, and I spoke to council there for lots of projects that were not actual affordable housing either. But to be doing worse than municipalities that kind of get a bad rap for being really unaffordable and unlivable I think is very embarrassing. And then I also noticed that in this development, we've got 12 units that are going to be 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom, which is great for families. What I did notice is that there's no 1-bedroom. That's all the remaining, I think, 1 unit is a studio, which I've lived in a studio apartment. It sucks. And what it got me thinking of was, if I wanted to live in a 1-bedroom apartment, where would I go? And so I started looking up apartments right now for rent in Richmond at 1-bedroom. And so there's a range of $1,300 a month to $1,900 a month. And for that to be possible, and for that to be affordable, I would have to be making $22 an hour. The minimum wage still hasn't hit $16 yet. So while these rates that we have for this development are the right rates, and I think that Dee Whalen also mentioned that, those are good things, the reality of what people are actually able to do, what people can find in Richmond is completely different. And so I think that that's the context that we need to be reviewing these types of things in. I understand that, you can sit back and say, well, it's the permit is being issued, or, it's going forward the way that it is, and that's fine, and we can't go back and tell them, oh no, you have to redo everything. I understand how that works, but I don't think that excludes or precludes us from reviewing what we need to do. And so I understand that you're going through the OCP and that you're going to be updating things, but it needs to be the top priority, and it needs to be from an affordability context. It can't be just, what's supposedly feasible, because if other cities, it's feasible to get these higher amounts of affordable housing units, then what do they know that we don't, right? What are they doing that somehow isn't possible in Richmond? And then I just wanted to kind of throw in just a little comment because of the question that was asked by Councillor Day to Mr. Yang earlier, the question of, would you rather wait 5 years to get it all right, or do you want to just kind of take what you've got coming right now? And I think I just want to say that's like, it's not really a fair question to ask the people who have been excluded from affordable housing, because, obviously I think that you should be asking for more now, that it shouldn't take 5 years. But this is the system that you've built, and it's not working, so it should be top priority to fix it, and as fast as possible.
Thank you. We've got a question from Councillor Day.
Thank you very much, and I was going to ask you that question, and I know it's not fair to ask, but you've obviously done a lot of homework, and you've spoken to City Council in Vancouver, and you moved to Richmond. So what is your observation of the difference in the rates of rent between Vancouver and Richmond? Is Richmond a little bit better than Vancouver?
Yeah, so I moved to Richmond initially because I couldn't afford to live in Vancouver anymore. I moved here as a renter. It was still not very affordable when I moved here. It's only gotten worse. But I can't afford to rent in Vancouver either.
Okay.
Right, and so that's why I say, they're not even doing a great job with affordability as well. But at the very least, in their policy, they have higher requirements than we do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. With that, may I have a motion to rise and report? All those in favor, opposed, carried. Brings us to the consent agenda, which has on the agenda receipt of the committee minutes, the 2022 local general and school election, the appointment of the chief election officer and the deputy, banning rodenticides on city-owned property in Richmond update, land use applications for first reading. It goes to public hearing on April 19th. There's only one, 11720 Williams Road, rezoning from single detached RS1E to the compact single detached RC2 zone. We have the housing agreement bylaw 10-129 to permit Richmond to secure affordable housing units at 8131 Westminster Highway. The child care needs assessment and strategy, the 2021 update, a draft senior strategy for 2022 to 32, the zoning bylaw amendment, the public hearing requirement, ICBC, the City of Richmond Road Improvement Program, the 2022 update, and finally, the Provincial Watershed Security Strategy and Fund. May I have a motion to adopt those by general consent? So it's moved and seconded. Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I'll be supporting everything on the agenda tonight. Just a couple of comments on some of them and some questions of staff. Unfortunately, on item number 7, I was actually quite distressed to hear what I would call a indiscrepancy had by voters within it. And in terms of appointing our people, I would hope that we could provide as many opportunities as possible for people. And to be quite frank with you, use common sense when we're dealing with specific issues. And democracy is sacred, and it must be preserved. Just look across the waters and you can see where democracy is. And I think people need to know voting is a fundamental right, but also a duty of all citizens. And I feel very strongly one. So we need to be providing as many opportunities as possible. I know we go into care homes, Your Worship, and we take ballots to them where they wish to vote, and they ask the residents, for example, do you want to vote? And that's by choice, if they do, etc. But more importantly, I think we need to look at restrictions, but the policy that we have, and try to deal with those situations when possible. So I think I heard the delegation, and I hope everybody heard it, and I hope that we will address it as we come forward. To be quite frank with you, I'd like to know if it doesn't have to be answered tonight, but if there were other indiscrepancies that or difficulties during the election that we have to deal with. And if we need to put more staff on it or put more funds towards it, then we must do so on that. I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody, but I do sympathize with the delegation tonight, and I would apologize as a councillor to them for your indiscrepancy and anything that helped admonished your family in any way, shape, or form. So I'm sorry, unfortunately, and that's from the heart. Your Worship, you know, it's interesting tonight, and I think the delegation's coming forward in terms of affordable housing. And, you know, Richmond has done its best over the years with the bylaws that we had to interpret. And we are getting affordable housing, but the whole picture is not there, Your Worship. We don't remember, it's great to say, well, we're not moving ahead, et cetera. But some of these developments have been in the hopper for 4 years to 5 years from when the land was purchased. And some of them are 7 or 8 years before you ended up with keys to the apartment. And I know we need to do better. We have done nothing in terms of subsidized housing, and I think we need to do that in terms of total rental. We need to have lemur, we need to have market. But we also have to give the developer a number of units in terms of the market and or sale so that we can have all what we want at subsidized and lemur. We've proven that with the Kiwanis. We have 300 units there, and I don't want to go back on it. We proved that with Stories, and we proved it with Pathways. And our system is working from that perspective with other partners. But it's great that the province bangs its chest and the feds bang their chest, but as you well know, we don't even, correct me if I'm wrong, do we have a national housing minister? We didn't with the Conservative government. You and I met with them, how many years ago was that, Your Worship, out in Burnaby? We haven't heard one thing from Ottawa since. Okay, now what about the province? Let's get together with the province. They bang their chest too. Well, at least Mr. Eby is talking the right language. Now, if he can deliver, I would welcome it to work together so that we can get the necessary housing. He wants to take a fundamental right away from us so that we don't have community input into it. And yeah, I think you and others know what I'm talking about. And I think we've got to be very careful. Yes, we can demand more density, but we don't know that the developer can afford to do that. I'm not a fan of townhomes. I believe we should have apartments, 4 rises, 6 rises, 8 rises, and towers with elevators in them, which are available to all groups. And we don't necessarily have them. So I will still support item number 10, Your Worship, on it. It's not the best now. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that that's been in the hopper since 2017.
Which one?
Number 10. Now, I stand corrected, but it's been in the hopper for a while.
For a while.
So the mortgage at the bank has been sitting there, and we wonder why it's $800,000 is because the developer hasn't been able to move forward. And one of the things, if we want more density, we have to have approvals move up a lot faster than 18 months to 2 years. So on that, so I mean on that. On the positive side, I'm glad to see the seniors draft strategy, 55 years and above. That's a good strategy working for seniors. A question to staff or a comment. Is this going to the various seniors advisory committees? I'm not on the seniors advisory committee. I know a number of other councillors on, but will this go to them for further comment? Whoever it is.
Serena, can you help us out?
Well, I direct that, Your Worship.
Sorry, through Your Worship to Councillor McNulty, we did pass the strategy by the advisory committee, Richmond Seniors Advisory, as well as the stakeholder committee that
and Minoru Senior Center as well. And Minoru Seniors.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I'll be supporting the childcare policy. We've got to continue on that. Richmond's doing very well in terms of getting partners for childcare. But I would maintain, and I thank staff for the update on it, but I would maintain that we're going to need more childcare. If we can keep young families in Richmond and bring young families to Richmond. Your figures for today are fine. I hope that we keep reviewing those policies each year and that we have an opportunity to update it and continue to put resources in there and even use some of our own land that we've got. We can use, spend some of our properties for housing ourselves and getting into partners. BC Housing is a good partner in providing funding, but that's as far as they go. I think we've got to look to other partners for increase in housing, and I'd be more than happy to continue to look on them. They do a good job in looking at it. And the other thing, to your worship, and I mentioned that with Monado Village, I did it at planning, and the 836 subsidized homes that Metro Vancouver has, and you and Councillor Steves are directors there, that we possibly look to redevelopment in those areas. We have the land, and we push Metro Vancouver. They're pushing a lot in Vancouver downtown, which is rightly needed. They're pushing a lot at Kingston Garden. They're pushing a lot out in Surrey, and they're now expanding to those that don't have anything. However, we've got some opportunities in our backyard. So with that, Your Worship, I'll be supporting everything on the agenda. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Day.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brody. First, thanks to the delegation to come forward on item 7. You know, when we hear from you, we can do something about it. So that's a really powerful message. Getting involved in any issue with the city can really make a difference. And I started off as a community activist, so I really appreciate it when people come forward. I know you sit there with, you know, butterflies in your stomach, and it's not an easy thing to do. So thank you for that. Number 8 is the banning rodenticides. That's the bad stuff that kills all our birds. And the City of Richmond's a leader on this, and I'm glad that we've done that because it's really important that we have a healthy environment to live in. Number 9 is 2 houses going where there is 1 now. It's going to be 2 secondary suites, so that is an improvement. If we're going to rebuild, let's rebuild better for the future. Item number 10, just a lot of people have spoken about item number 10. This has already been through the hopper. All we're agreeing on today is the housing agreement. So someone that's going to take care of those 13 units. But taking the opportunity to come forward and speak is really important because, again, if we hear from you, we're going to know that makes a difference. I personally have voted against projects like Richmond Centre, Talisman, Spires, and Smith because they weren't good enough. They didn't have near enough rentals, not near enough affordable housing. And personally, I'd rather see the land sit empty until we get it right, but that's my own personal opinion. Number 11 is the child care needs assessment. We really, really need to review this. I made a motion. I wanted to ask staff a question. I had asked, every time a new development comes forward, we make the developers pay a certain percentage towards affordable housing, a certain percentage towards public art, and so on and so on. Why couldn't we add that to the list of charges that a developer must pay, which is a percentage goes towards creating more childcare space? I think it's a critical thing. You know, people can't go to work, can't afford the rent if they don't have anywhere that their kids can be healthy and happy. So if staff could answer that, I'd appreciate that. I know I made a motion, I believe, in planning about reviewing that policy.
Well, isn't that the answer? We're reviewing the policy.
So when can we expect to?
Suzanne, when are we going to hear more about this?
Yes, through your worship, to Councillor Day, we do have some provisions in our, mainly in the city centre, to try and require contributions towards childcare. Usually it's typically larger projects. I believe at one of the last planning committee meetings, there was direction for staff to have a closer look at that. I don't have an exact timeline on that, but I'm sure we could get you some more details on that when the anticipated return would be.
Good, sooner is good, thank you. Number 12, it's the seniors strategy. I sit on the seniors advisory committee as a liaison, and they very carefully went through this report and really combed through it, and they were happy with the way it was written. And again, it came up that seniors are so affected by the cost of living and the cost of housing. Housing crisis has hit them harder than many's because they have such a fixed income. Number 13 is the province actually has allowed us to nix public hearings on certain rezonings, and we're actually saying no thanks. We're going to go ahead and still have those public hearings. You know, what does it cost? An extra night once a month that you have to sit down and hear from the public. So appreciate that the province is trying to streamline things, but I think hearing from the public is more important than getting it, done faster. Item number 14 is the ICBC road improvements. So if we get our grant applications with ICBC, we have $9.45 million worth of road improvements, and they could reduce the City of Richmond costs down to $5.865 million. So that is huge if we get that money, and that helps save tax dollars. And I had a question of staff on number 15, the watershed security strategy. It says on page, I think, 221, that farms use stormwater for irrigation that's stored in the drainage system, and then water is brought in from the Fraser River into the drainage system. Does that save the farmers money because they're using stormwater, because they're not using potable water?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, absolutely. They won't have to pay for drinking water. Instead using rainwater for irrigation.
I didn't quite get that. So are you saying that if they use stormwater, it's cheaper than drinking water?
It's that's correct. Yes.
Thank you. That's good news to hear. That's good for the farmers. Thank you. That's it for me, Mayor Brody.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Liu.
Worship, I too will be supporting everything on tonight's consent agenda. Not to belabor the point, thank all of you for coming out and speaking, especially Ms. Piao. It seems to me Council has done a lot of work to try and make sure and approve extra spending to make sure that we have accessible, clean, sanitary, safe, and a variety of different ways for people to vote. So voting is very important to us, everyone being able to cast their vote, and that's why we made sure that there was mail-in voting for the last vote, and we're making sure it's available coming forward as well. So, and certainly I'm sure all of our procedures will be reviewed to make sure that everyone has the proper opportunity to vote however they choose. Not to belabor this point, also number 10, this does just paper the agreement. We are just basically putting paper to an agreement that was already made. And changing it at this point would be like you're going up for your graduation and being told you need 50% more credits to graduate at this point. So it just follows the pattern. We have already increased the amount, so any new development coming forward at this point has to have more than 10%, has to have more, has to also have market rentals in it. So we have increased the numbers. We have increased, we do actually have some fully accessible townhouses. So there was a townhouse complex that went in Hamilton. They were asked to put in some affordable housing units, and I asked them to put in one fully accessible, so they had to put the lift in it so that some family can live there with whoever is part of their family that may be in a wheelchair that needs that full accessibility in that affordable housing unit. So it's also rent controlled, how much they will be paying for it. And the kids who grow up in that neighborhood will grow up seeing somebody living in their neighborhood with different needs, and they'll think to build their world differently as they move forward. Some of the things that happened in Richmond in the past, and I'm sure Councillor Steeves will attest to this, is back in the 80s, there were duplexes, and Richmond Council decided that duplexes were sort of an inferior form of living. They weren't sort of fancy enough, and so they actually banned duplexes and took away the right to have duplexes. They were also concerned in places like Westwind and some other neighborhoods that you might choose to buy a piece of land that the developer wasn't already building, and you might choose to build too small of a house. So the actual rule was in place that you couldn't build too small of a house and degrade the value of the neighborhood. So, you know, we've come completely full circle now where we want some smaller units. We want some duplexes. We want a bigger variety of housing. And I know that this council's worked very hard on this. I wasn't here in 2012, I came after that, but certainly we've done a lot of work on many of the different housing options and affordability streams. I would like to talk about number 11, childcare needs assessment strategy. I know since I've started on council 7 years ago, we've opened and secured, I think, half a dozen childcare spaces. So Cranberry, Willow, Riverside, Seasong, and Gardens were the ones that I attended the ribbon cuttings for, and I know there were some others that happened too. And I know coming up, 3 of our city-owned facilities will now transition to $10 a day. So not only have we built it from developer contributions, we've built those spaces and have lower rents, lower costs for the people using them because they are not for profit. But we are also now having 3 of those places having $10 a day. West Canby, Cook, and Seasong will start on the $10 a day program, which will really help some of the families here in our community. And last but not least, number 14, we have a number of road improvements that we're going to be making. And I'd just like to thank all of council for agreeing with me to prioritize the number 5 in Canby intersection. That's going to be a $2.76 million intersection improvement. I don't know if you've ever gone there while kids are being dropped off or anything else. There's 2 elementary schools in the nearby. There's the shopping center, there's the bank, there's a park there. I think it's very important that we move that up, prioritize that, got that going. Normally we wait until all 4 corners start redeveloping and the developer pays for it. This we pushed forward and we're also getting half of it, 1.38 million paid for by TransLink, and that money's confirmed. So thank you to all my colleagues for supporting me on this, and that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Steves. Harold?
Yeah, thanks. Councillor Liu actually did say some of what I was going to say. I'll just add to it. I'm finding it very, well, it's my pet peeve, our lack of densification. And it goes back a long, long way. She mentioned the duplexes, which was just insane that what we did. But we did something else that was even worse. People didn't want to change their housing styles, and so we had a process called the 702 process that went from one subdivision to another, and people had to vote on it to keep the lot size the same. So if you had a 55-foot or 60 by 120-foot lot, it stayed a 60 and 120-foot lot, because people didn't want to have it divided into 233s like the Stevenson Town site is, or 45s. They thought it would devalue their property. Well, we're stuck with that now, and what we're doing now is getting these huge houses that house 1 or 2 people. Many of them are empty, and certainly none of them are affordable. And then at the same time, years and years ago, when I was elected to council, believe it or not, in 1968, we were planning high-rises in Stevenson. We got 1, 8 stories, the Lions Manor, but that whole block to the north of the Stevenson Community Center was supposed to be densified. We were planning to densify Railway Avenue all the way to Granville and number 3 Road, so we'd have LRT to Stevenson. All these things fell through, and the densification hasn't come back. Blundell Shopping Center, we should be looking at all of our shopping centers, Blundell, Francis, Terra Nova, and put 6 stories apartments all the way around them. Basically, you should have people living where their shopping is. We've got a lot of changes that have to be made. And that's where you put your affordable housing as well. So I think as we come to the time, we're looking at, well, we were warned back in 1973 when we brought in the Agricultural Land Reserve to save the farmland, because if you don't, it's going to be covered with housing, and you need to densify the residential areas, because when the climate changes, and it's exactly what scientists told us, and the environment changes, there's going to be a mass exodus from the south, and the population will be moving into Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia. Well, now we're seeing wars and everything else that are causing that to happen. So we're not going to have a small population for very much longer. And I think it's time that we looked at densifying. We shouldn't be building any more single-family houses. And I'm pleased that people are coming out today and saying these things, that we do have to densify, got to get lower-cost housing and provide it for the young people that are trying to find a place to live. So I'm supporting all the agenda that's on here tonight. let's get those over. They've got some prior deals on, get them over with, and get on to doing some proper planning. And we need to get these 702 projects back before any other applications come in, and get rid of this idea that we have these huge single-family lots and that we don't densify.
All right, thank you. Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be supporting the consent agenda and just want to speak to a few, and it's really nice to see so many people in council chambers. We've missed having people here, and it's really great to have the delegations come and share their concerns and ideas with us. Number 10, the housing agreement at 8131 Westminster Highway. As has been mentioned, this just permits the city to enter into the housing agreement with the applicant. I do have two questions of staff through you, Your Worship. On our Council 66, the rates are listed there. So my question through you to staff is, who sets those rates? And I know that every year it goes up by CPI. So who sets those rates, and is there an opportunity to ask for an increase in the rates to further match what the community is having to pay to secure housing like we did for the safer units?
Through your worship to Councillor McPhail, the City of Richmond establishes the rates for the low-end market rental program, and they're defined in the city's affordable housing strategy. The rates defined in the strategy are applied to all new developments secured through the program.
And do you do a review then of them to get, how do you come to these rates?
The affordable housing strategy directs the city to update rental rates for the Lemur program every 2 years. So the affordable housing strategy was approved in 2018, and the first 2-year review period was in 2020. Due to the COVID pandemic, the city elected to keep the current rental rates in place, and the next review is scheduled for later this year.
Okay, that's great. And my next question is about the chart on CNCL 90. I know you were asked this at planning and you did answer it, so perhaps you could answer that again about the chart and you know, the format of the chart, the type of questions that are asked on that chart.
Sure. Through your worship, Councillor McPhail, the housing agreement ensures that affordable housing tenants will not be charged any additional costs over and above their rent. And the information in Appendix A in the table is correct and up to date. It does not authorize property managers to charge fees. Instead, the table is used to confirm that no fees are charged in compliance with the agreement.
All right, thank you. Item number 11, the 2017-2022 Child Care Needs Assessment and Strategy 2021 update. In the 2017-2022 Richmond Child Care Needs Assessment and Strategy, 7 strategic directions and 32 recommended actions address the current and future needs related to child care in Richmond. Thank you to staff for a great report which highlighted not only the wide-reaching impacts of COVID-19 on childcare in Richmond, but the significant advancements and achievements occurred within the city's childcare portfolio. Thank you to the Richmond Childcare Development Advisory Council Committee, who provided continued support to city staff and city council, delivering valuable advice and insight on childcare planning and service delivery in Richmond. As Councillor Liu mentioned, the city has seen a lot of success in obtaining several child care centres over the last couple of years. I do have a question through you, Your Worship, to staff. The report highlights how demand for child care spaces continues to exceed the available supply. At planning, staff was asked about zoning, and they replied that childcare is allowed in almost every type of zoning in Richmond. So what can we do to encourage more childcare spaces in the private realm? I know there's the 2021-2031 Richmond Childcare Action Plan that is ongoing as well, but is there something that we can do? Is this something that's discussed at the Childcare Development Advisory Committee?
Through your worship to Councillor McPhail, this is a topic of conversation with the Childcare Development Advisory Committee, and is also an area where we have actually seen a tremendous amount of growth in our childcare spaces in Richmond since 2016, when the original needs assessment and strategy was developed. But currently in Richmond, about 65% of the childcare supply is operated as private businesses, and these private businesses do provide a very valuable and significant amount of our childcare stock.
I know it was really hard for my son and daughter-in-law when my daughter-in-law went back to work to find childcare for their daughter, and it was through word of mouth that they found private in-home childcare provider. So, that was really good. But, I've heard through them and through other people just how extremely difficult it is. So hopefully there'll be some traction on all the actions that we have in place. And thanks again for a good report. And just the item 12, the draft senior strategy 2022-2032. So the purpose of this report is to present the draft senior strategy to council and to propose a public engagement process to seek community input on the strategic directions and actions outlined in the draft strategy. There were 5 strategic directions and 29 actions to be completed over the 10-year plan. And I really believe that the public engagement will provide valuable input to ensure the draft senior strategy captures the community's priorities for seniors over the next 10 years. A question through you, Your Worship. The report outlines the proposed public engagement activities, but what is the timeline for the public consultation? I know that, especially in the senior population, some people are hesitant still to, even though things are opening up a little bit in COVID-19, but, and I think that in-person consultation is going to be really important with this community. So what is the public engagement timeline?
Through Your Worship to Councillor McPhail, we will be sending a memo outlining the exact dates in the next week or so about the exact time that these will take place. And it will be, in addition to a survey, there will be some in-person opportunities for the public to attend, and those will include existing activities, seniors activities, including the wellness clinics at some of the city facilities, as well as at a number of community organizations in Richmond.
So I know that there's the Let's Talk option, I think that's really great, but as we know, not everybody likes using technology, so will there be the opportunity for community members to then fill out hard copy surveys or something like that?
Yes, through Your Worship to Councillor McPhail, there will be paper copies available and also one-on-one support from our community partners. So there are some volunteers that will be able to guide some of the seniors who need extra support, and that will also be virtual, on the phone, or also in person.
That's fantastic, and thank you for such a great report. There was some, really good information and data that I think is really helpful for us as we go forward. Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, just before we go to Councillor Wolf, I want to just mention there's been a couple of references to this table, which is on council page 90, and it talks about these fees collected, and a reference has been made by staff to the fact that the agreement says you can't charge those fees, so it's really just irrelevant. My opinion is that it avoids the point that you can't charge those fees, and certainly could be missed by a lot of people. To me, it implies that you can charge those kind of fees. So I'm just suggesting that staff, the next time when we use this kind of a document in the future and that we approve it, that staff consider putting either, if you have to put in the fees collected portion, which I think you could cut it out, but if you have to have it in there, maybe putting NA or something nil or something like that in the various boxes, just to highlight the fact that nobody's going to make a mistake here and charge things that they're not entitled to do. So we'll go to Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be speaking on a number of items and asking a few questions on the consent agenda. I will be in support of everything that is on the consent agenda. First item is the receipt of committee minutes. I know that in the package here it does say it's distributed separately and not everyone maybe was able to access those minutes, and I just wanted to mention one thing. In the Public Works and Transportation Committee meeting, there was an item added for number 6, road traffic safety, and I just wanted to commend committee for the discussion that was had around potential changes, and that we've asked staff for information around speed limits and ways to improve safety on number 6 Road, and in addition, asking for information from the RCMP around enforcement in this area of concern. The next item, number 7, I have a question to staff on this one, so very thankful for the delegate bringing this forward. I'd like to know a few things right now. One is, were staff aware of this before tonight? And were there more situations? Was there a staff already response? And are we going to follow the procedure that was outlined through some of the channels that the delegate mentioned that they're going through?
Staff have been asked to comment on that, so we'll be getting more information on it.
Okay, thank you. And then will that information be closed or would that be open that we could share with the delegate?
Unless there's something unusual, it's going to be all open.
Okay, thank you. Item number 8, that's the banning rodenticide, and I really want to thank council for making the changes before this came tonight. There are lots of ways that we can go ahead without rats. There's lots of maintenance things we can do. There's other methods to remove them, to prevent them from becoming a pest problem. And what I really am thankful for is that we removed the end date of the ban. I think the province has it wrong. I think many other municipalities that have already implemented this ban have got it right to not have an end date, because clearly the science is out there. There's other options. We don't need to keep delaying the movement that having an end date to the ban would have done. So I'm very pleased that this item is on the agenda with the language that it has today. Item number 10, it was the one I was hesitating tonight if I would support it or not. I'm really thankful for the discussion that was had as a result of the delegates who brought things forward. I also appreciate the expertise on council who understand the trust issues that could be broken if we're taking agreements away this late in the game. I was not on council when this was approved, and by looking at the design, even at those years ago, it, in my mind, was the wrong move. But I am definitely in support of securing affordable housing units and working with developers who have put up the minimum, at the time at least, to provide. So although I'm opposed to all aspects of the development, I do support the housing agreement stage. Item number 11, the childcare needs. I just want a few comments on that one. I asked a question at Planning Committee about the report statement that only 33% of children in Richmond are provided care through licensed childcare. I have a daughter who's under 3 years old and is in a daycare in Richmond. And it's shocking to me in many regards how challenging it is to find daycare, to secure it. I see many of the women, there's no men who work typically at these facilities, so the amount of women who are paid the wages that they are, and there's very little in the provincial update and the strategy Canada-wide to go to this $10 a daycare route. There's really not a lot in there to fund the staff. My wife and I would give our arm for quality daycare and to make sure our daughter is safe in the place that she goes. So the value is one thing, but the quality of the care, and when it's lost because staff at these facilities have to move to another one or have to catch the bus right out front of the daycare and leave our city to go home because they can't afford to live in the community where they work. There's just so many things that are atrocious with the direction, I think, of childcare needs and assessment. So I'm thankful for this report, identifying the areas where we can work and improve the strategy. But on an item later in the agenda, I'll expose another way where we could be doing or asking our partners to be doing better. And then in closing here, sorry, two last ones, real briefly. Item number 14, the ICBC City of Richmond Road Improvement Program. I'm really pleased on there that there is on our page CNCL 217, one of the projects is Westminster Highway North. the intersection there. There was just a pedestrian that was hit by a vehicle a month ago. This is out in Hamilton, East Richmond area. And it's been identified. There was lots of concern in the neighborhood around this constant hazardous intersection that right now just has a fire hall light. So there's fire department, fire building right nearby. So it's going to go to a pedestrian activated intersection with an ease to transition it to a vehicle triggered intersection if need be after that. And this morning, as I was heading off to teach at school, this exact location, a woman darted right out to catch a bus, coming off one bus to get across the street to catch that next one coming. And staff have identified this, and thankfully this type of a funding agreement helps us reach more projects like this. And I've seen real swift action when the staff can find these areas of concern. And finally, I do have a question on this last one, number 15, the Provincial Watershed Security Strategy and Fund. At the Public Works and Transportation Committee meeting, I did bring up a number of comments, and I was assured that staff were going to take those comments and infuse them into the comments that we endorsed, but I don't see those changes or where those additions are. So I'd just like staff to comment where some of the specific language around Richmond-specific peat soil preservation, and where that would, when or where those comments will go.
Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, staff will take a look at the applicable comments and add, as requested and decided upon by committee, the appropriate places for peat placement throughout the comments. And there are several locations, so staff will submit those as needed before submission if approved this evening.
Thank you. Through your worship, then just to follow up on that. So I appreciate that. So it seems like we won't get another look at those comments because I know there's already a deadline pending to get the comments to the province. So I put the trust in staff to find those specific locations. And then just in closing on that specific item, I did raise this at Public Works and Transportation, but I'll share it for the public record here. There is a provincial supplement strategy around flood debris. It's called, if you search up Flood Debris Explorer, anyone from the public, anywhere you live, anywhere you walk along our dike, if you note something that may have been a result of flooding upriver, up the Fraser River, and then flowed down and was caught on high tide or mark, if you put it into this registry, the province will go and locate them and remove them. So just over the weekend, I located one of the ones that was marked on their map on that site to confirm if it was still there. And sure enough, this large fridge freezer complex was tied up with all the driftwood. And you can call the number 1-800-663-3456 if you don't want to go online to report using the map feature. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Au.
Yes, Worship, thank you. I would like to start off by thanking the delegation and the audience tonight. It has been 2 years that I've been talking to an empty room on council meetings. So tonight, when I came into the room, I have to say that I was positively surprised to see so many people. And I hope that in the future, we will keep this on. People will come and be engaged and asking questions. I think this is a very important part of our democratic system. And I also want to point out that tonight we have a very rich agenda. You can see that, we touch on housing, water, election, environment, traffic, childcare, and seniors issues. So you can see that this is what we do day in, day out for the citizens in Richmond. So I would like to touch on 3 things tonight. The first one is item 7. I would like to thank Jasmine for bringing up the issue and also sharing the experience. I have to say that I feel bad that that happened to your family. Especially, we also had a federal election and a provincial election during the pandemic, and there was no such experience similar to this one. So I hope that staff will come back and give us some clarification or some explanation. But I would like to say that, as a council, we would like to make sure that in the upcoming election, we should have no obstacles for people who want to participate. So we would like to open up every channel, every means to facilitate people to participate. So I think this is one thing probably I can say that the whole council is committed. And the second item I want to talk about is the M12, Draft Senior Strategy 2022 to 2032. I'd like to thank staff for this very important draft strategy. As you know, our population is aging, and the needs of this age group is also growing. And I would like to point out that as in page 151, it shows that in the past 12 years, actually, the City Council has developed different plans and different strategies on different issues. And these senior strategies, I would say, a comprehensive plan to bring all this together so that we are moving forward in a concerted way. This is a very good report. I would recommend that people in the audience, people, the general public should spend some time reading this report. And the information is very rich. And especially I like the research section from page 170 to 186. It talks about the strengths, the gaps, and the opportunities in providing service to our seniors. So I think this section is well done. Now, I'm not saying that the other sections are not well done, right? But this particular section is the section I like most. And I have two concerns reading the report. The first one is on page 168 on the issue of barriers for seniors to get service. And on the top of this page, it talks about the language barriers. And I think it's really alarming to note that 19% of our seniors living in Richmond experience language barrier. So we are talking 1 in 5. This is a huge number and a big percentage of our seniors who might not be able to get the service they need because of this barrier. So I think we must pay attention to it and see what we can do to reduce this barrier. And personally, I have always come across people, senior people coming to me saying that, they have difficulties in navigating through the system. They may need different types of service, housing, social service, recreation, and many other things. But they find it very difficult to navigate through the system from one place to the other, and then a simple thing such as they might have applied for senior housing, and then they've been waiting, and then they don't know where to go to ask for information and to know if there's any movement or any progress for the application. So my question to staff is that, now, I know that in the provincial government, they have a senior advocate, right, trying to help people to get information as easily as possible. I think is there any talk in the city that we would have a person or an office like that to help seniors to navigate through the system in order to get the kind of services that they need? So is there any talk about having a person or an office to address this language obstacle issue?
Through your worship to Councillor Al, specifically for this seniors strategy, awareness and bringing information to the senior was throughout the strategy. We do still work very closely with a lot of our community partners who are able to provide information and referral to seniors as well in other languages. So there are different points of where inquiries come through, and those are through the staff that work with seniors within the city and also through the senior center as well. If they are needing language support, there are some staff who have that language support, but also if we do need it, we will work with the other services, such as our Richmond Multicultural Association and Success, and a number of other community partners who can help us with that translation.
Great. I think it's more than just translation, because we also know that many of the immigrants, they come here, they come from a very different system. So for them to really understand and really know how to use the system is important. And sometimes it's more than just a translation or a referral. Perhaps, we need to have some person to really guide those seniors to go through the system, so that really, bring them to the place or provide them with information at one place instead of referring them to 5 places. So I hope that when it comes back, we'll address that issue. And secondly, I just want to share.
Through your worship to Councillor Al, sorry, I was just going to answer your question. We do have an action surrounding that, because we did find that seniors were coming through multiple channels to find one sort of information. So we do have an action surrounding just exploring either a one-stop shop or just one location where they can access a number of services. So we have included that in one of our actions.
Very good. And I just also want to share my ended observations that the tone of this strategy is treating seniors as consumers or recipients of services. But I also want to say that many of the seniors, especially right now we're talking about 55 and over, many of them can be contributors or partners of services. So yes, we talk about the senior group as people who need to use our services, but I think at the same time there are lots of resources that we can count on them in providing or being a partner of providing services. So I just want to share my observation on the tone of the report. And the third issue I want to talk about is the item 15, Provincial Watershed Security Strategy and Fund. Again, I think this is a very important report and also a very important step in managing our water resources. So we know that in BC and in Richmond, we are rich in water resources. However, because of climate change and many other things, I have to say that we are also facing challenges, and we could be in crisis if we don't manage our water resources in the right way. So I think this is a direction, a positive step in the right direction. And especially, I would like to see that because of this consultation, and at the end, we can have better governance model for water resources management in the province. As being pointed out by staff on page 223, that has been a problem in the past. The different jurisdictions might have overlapping or conflicting, or there are gaps in the governance. So I hope that can be addressed because of this exercise. Now I want to ask staff a question. I regard underground water as part of the water resources. So I want to ask staff, who regulates the use of underground water in Richmond, such as digging wells for drinking or for irrigation? So who regulates underground water in Richmond? And have we experienced any problems concerning the use of underground water in Richmond in the past?
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Al, the province is the primary regulator for groundwater in Richmond. The city hasn't really faced any problems in this regard, only due because we don't typically have wells used for drinking water as well as irrigation due to the conditions. Most of our system is relied upon in that respect from Metro Vancouver.
Okay, good. Now, just to follow up, so is the management of underground water included in this study and consultation? Is that part of the consultation? The management of underground water?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Okay, good. Thank you. So with that, I will support everything on the consent agenda.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you, and through the chair, I too will be supporting everything on the consent agenda, and I too would like to thank everybody for coming out and for the delegations that spoke, because you have raised very important points, one being access to voting, which of course is crucial, and a second very important point is the affordable housing issue that
we are all talking about now. And I think we all face it. I face it through my own children. We have grandchildren. We have all kinds of friends, especially in the younger groups, who have had to move out of Richmond. And there's a housing continuum that affects a lot of different people in different groups. And I think it's something we're very aware of, and I think we're working very hard to do it, including the OCP review. So just on a couple of specific points, Your Worship, with number 8, the rodenticide ban, on page 44, I think it is, in the report, it mentions practical solutions that we might do, for instance, in the case of demolitions. And I'd like staff maybe to just comment on what some of those practical solutions are, because rodents, rats in particular, are a problem, and it's a problem for everybody. So what are the practical alternatives that you might use? Because when we had the Stevenson development, which is the area I live, I know that there was a rat invasion, and a lot of people suffered from that. So could you comment on the practical solutions?
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Hobbs, are you referring to the practical solutions before the demolition?
Yeah, and during the demolition as well, because it happens before, during, and then people live with it after.
Absolutely. Through the Worship, to Councillor Hobbs, typically what happens before a demolition, practically you would remove any food sources, any garbage piles, anything that would attract rodents to that area. You would set out exclusion traps. In the Richmond's case, it would be non-chemical traps. You would monitor those traps accordingly, and then you would, following the demolition, you would also monitor the area surrounding that to ensure that the rodents haven't found suitable habitat in other areas in the neighborhood.
Thanks, and I think it's good for people to know that the city has resources that can be contacted if you want help and advice with that. The next item I'd like to comment on is number 11, and that's the child care issue. We've heard a lot about it today, but you know, it is actually a very good report. I appreciate the analysis and the planning that's gone into it. The policy is sound. We've had very good results through developer amenity and different contributions, voluntary contributions and grants. And I think it says in the report from 2016 to 2021 that we've had a 33% increase. So as you've heard, we're not where we want to be, but a lot of progress has been made, and I think we'll continue to make progress on that issue. The next one that I'll comment on is the seniors report, and that again is an excellent report with probably 5 principles, I think, guiding principles, and about 7 research themes. So in the report, it does say that I think we're at 32% of the population as seniors, 55 and over. And by 2036, we're going to increase to 39%. So it's a growing segment of the population. And the question I have of staff on that is, if you look at census information and different data sources, when do we reach the tipping point of our senior population? When is it that the senior population will top out? Clearly, it's never going to be 100%. So what is it going to be, and what's the forecast for that? Or have we been able to look at that census data yet?
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Hobbs, right now we only have the 2016 statistics right now, and we'll be receiving by the end of this year and early next year the life expectancy as well as the specific seniors population, 55 plus and over. We will be receiving that later on in the year.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, the report does highlight our life expectancy in Richmond and the healthy situation that our community is in, so that's excellent. The last question on that is, do we have any idea on the percentage of seniors in our community that actually participate in the various opportunities and infrastructure that we have?
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Hobbs, there will be a memo coming out shortly outlining the highlights for the seniors area for 2021, and that will include participation rates. We do track participation rates for city participation as well as association and society, and they are also available on the updates. We do senior services updates probably from 2015 to 2020. You can also see the participation rates there.
Sure. To Councillor Al's point about language and barriers, the more that we can reduce those, I mean, possibly we can increase our participation rates by doing that, and thereby the health of our community and our seniors. So that'd be great. My last comment, Your Worship, is on item number 14, and that's the ICBC contributions to road safety and different improvement projects that we have going on in the city. And I just want to publicly acknowledge ICBC for doing that. It's something they've done for decades with all cities, and they make significant contributions, and that allows the city to reduce costs to the taxpayers and improve road safety, which, as you all know, is more dangerous than anything else. We have more people killed and injured on our roads than in any other kind of way. So ICBC makes significant contributions, and I think we're all very grateful for that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So with that, I'm going to call the question on the consent agenda. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. That brings us to the one item that has been taken off the consent agenda, and we'll turn it over to Councillor Bill McNulty, Chair of the Planning Committee, to introduce it.
Thank you, Your Worship. One item, as you mentioned, is an application by Zhao XD Architects for rezoning at 80, 31, 51, and 71 Number 2 Road, and 5760, 80, and 5786 Blundell Road from single detached R1E zone to the medium density townhome zone. And the recommendation of the Planning Committee was that the Richmond Zoning Bylaw 8500 Amendment 10,001 for the rezoning of 80, 31, 51, 71 Number 2 Road and 5760, 80, and 5786 Blundell Road from R1E zone to the medium density townhouses RTM3 zone be introduced and given first reading, and I would so move.
Moved and seconded. Do you want to comment on it?
Yes, Your Worship. Thank you very much, Your Worship. It's zoning next to some multifamily dwellings already, and we're talking about 25 townhomes at 8091 Number 2 Road, and it is a good development. It's designated as neighborhood residential in that area, and it's consistent with the designation for the arterial land use policy. As a matter of fact, the density was increased. It went up to 0.7. It's not exactly what we probably want to increase the density, but the land can probably only hold so much. It's consistent again with all our policies and strategies on it. And as a result of the particular density, and I believe this was the one I said has been in the hopper since about 2017, there is a contribution instead of affordable units, almost $250,000 to the affordable housing strategy, cash that we need for us to develop other projects down the road. Although we would like units, it's very difficult in townhomes to get units. We also find that they are going to contribute amenities-based contribution of $56,000, $55,961, contributing 28 and change to the public art. The developer is also going to replace the center line delineators on Number 2 Road and putting $44,000 towards that. And also $81,000 for future upgrades for intersection and traffic safety and signals, for a total contribution of over $500,000 in cash to enhance that neighborhood and make it livable. It's an opportunity to work with another property for discussion in terms of a shared driveway, which can be used for multiple occasions. And that's part of our arterial road policy. And dealing with T intersection. It does have, in a way, excess parking. However, given the terms of our parking for this class of development, it's important that we follow our rules and regulations. So with that, Your Worship, I think it follows the arterial road policy. It gives us a density that's required of it for townhomes. And I think this should go forward to get first reading, and this would go forward to public hearing 1 month from now if it's passed tonight. Thank you.
Okay, let's see, we got Councillor Day.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brody. So I voted against this in the planning committee because sure, it follows the OCP, sure, it follows the arterial road policy, but it's just not good enough. I made a motion for a referral back to staff to look at better options. And the reason is, well, there's a number of reasons. The density in that area is already more than the arterial road policy states. So if you look at the east side of Blundell and Number 2 Road, you have mixed use. If you look at, you have BC Housing, you have, I think it's senior assisted housing, you have an actual senior's home there, you have shopping, you have grocers, you have restaurants, pharmacies, services, you have everything you need to make a new hub. And this lot, there's 6 lots that would be turned into 25 townhouses that would probably be worth somewhere around $1.5 million. So unaffordable, yeah, definitely not. And if we instead made a smaller footprint but made it taller, we could have, and we already have tall buildings on the other side of Blundell. I think it's called Rosewood Manor, I believe. And so we've already got that happening in the area. So it's consistent with what's already there. So my thought is let's refer this back to staff and work with the developer to find a better option, because so that's one of the reasons. Okay, the hub and the density. And then get this, there's a townhouse complex just to the south of this one that has like 8 units in it, and they have a driveway. They're gonna widen that by 3 feet. And then all those 8 townhouses that use that driveway now, and the 25 townhouses that are gonna be built, are all gonna use this one little driveway. That seems grossly unfair to the people, but there's a covenant on their townhouse development, so we don't have any choice about that one. So I'm not happy about the shared driveway. I think we could do far better. Then there's a loss of green space. All these, I forget how many trees that are going to be torn down, 12 trees, 2 of which are significant trees. But we have a brand new bylaw that says you can't take down significant trees, but we're going to let that happen, and they're going to have to build or plant 3 trees for every significant tree. So the loss of green space, the really underutilizing of that housing hub for that Blundell and Number 2 Road area is the reason I simply can't support this. And I would like to move, and maybe with the bigger council and not just planning committee, I could get support for this, that we refer this back to staff and take another kick at this can, because we only got one chance to get this right. Those townhouses are going to be there for 50 or 60 years, and everyone's going to say down the road, why didn't you build something more? And there's a development on for bylaws for adoption, and there's going to be 20% affordable housing in that one. Why couldn't we try to get that on this one? Why couldn't we get rental tenure zoning? And I just think we could do better. And honestly, it looks like a warehouse. You know, this could be over in, I don't know, the east of Ironwood. It's awful. It doesn't do what we need it to do. It's going to help 25 people who make a nice investment and probably never live in it. So I think we need to take another look at this one, and I would ask council to consider a motion to refer this back so we can take another kick at this can and get a better development.
Okay, I'll come back to you after we get other comments, but Councillor Wolf, or Councillor Day, we don't know whether investors are going to buy this or not. We just don't know. So I think
95% of people won't be able to afford it that live in Richmond.
It could be, but we have to deal with the appropriate use of land. We can't speculate like that. Councillor Wolf.
Thank you. Through your worship, my comments, I did speak at planning committee. I'm not on planning committee, so I couldn't support the referral then, but I will support the referral I expect is coming from Councillor Day soon. But I will speak some of the reasons that I am opposed to this project as it is stated. And also, as was reminded by one of the delegates today speaking on this item, that we're dealing with an old OCP, and there's so many potential upgrades that will come through the OCP process that is beginning soon. And I think a project like this in such a prime location of arterial roads, and as Councillor Day mentioned, across from the street from what's already there, this is the type of place where we do not want to put in just another whack of high-end luxury townhouses. I think the move to more density in a location like this is going to be a no-brainer in the future with the new OCP, but in the time being, I think we need to withhold the status quo types of decisions. And so that higher density can allow many other things that we need in our society. We need more access to nature, and yes, there'll be 12 trees removed, and they're supposed to plant 26, but they're actually going to plant 31. But some of those are going to be small little twig trees with roots in bound gravel and sand, and they're not going to grow to amount to anything, but at least people will see the greenery that comes with them. You can look through the report and connect to the issue earlier on about childcare. This building development is not going to include any indoor amenity space. Instead, they're going to give $56,000. This is the type of building that could have another licensed childcare facility that's in high demand. Yet we're letting them get off by just paying in lieu $56,000. Another contribution that they're providing is the affordable housing. What is $250,000 going to get us for affordable housing that they're not putting into the project, that they're just going to, again, give in lieu? I don't think that is any way of going forward and making progress to meet the strategies that our staff and the public have clearly identified for us. And then there was brought up the item on parking stalls. I agree, 55 parking stalls is a large amount, and I know it follows our existing OCP. But also the potential to have porous surfaces where people can park on, where it's not necessarily asphalt or concrete and paved over. There's options that we can build into the types of agreements, types of developments like this. There's also 3 large hedges that are being removed that could provide buffering for sound and for the neighbors, but there's no compensation required for removing any size of a hedge. So there's just so many aspects of this development that I think are the status quo that we need to get away from. And so I'll look forward to more discussion and a referral. Thank you.
Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be supporting this development. I think there's, it's going to be nice. The developer's done a lot of work on it. He's going to be planting a lot of trees on the site. Some of the trees that are being cut down, sure, they are significant. They're significant because of their size. So some of them are dying anyway, and one of them is an invasive species. So they're actually not trees we want there at all, or in Richmond. We don't want dying trees. We don't want them falling. The OCP is 8 years old. It's not that old. It's within a regular timeline. If you live on Clearwater, just inside of that neighborhood, you want some certainty as to what's going to be built on the arterial roads around you. If you suddenly have a 6-story or 14-story tower go up because there's some nearby and they're looking down into your backyard, you're not going to be very happy about that. You need to have some certainty when you buy your house, you have your property, of what's going to happen nearby. And that's why the whole OCP process happens. So we don't suddenly decide on a whim that, yes, we'd like 6 stories here this week, but 5 years ago we didn't. I think we need to, everything happens slowly so that everybody has time to adapt, address the change, and when the new OCP comes out, as it comes forward, you can comment on it. You can have an opinion about if you live near an arterial road or if you're in a neighborhood, of what the potential new buildings could be. If you want more density, let us know. We'd love to have that density. On the other hand, if you have a single-family home and all your neighbors have single-family homes and you'd actually prefer your neighborhood to stay like that, we'd like to hear about that too. I dare say, if you have a townhouse unit that you just moved into recently and you're told that you're going to share your driveway with the next townhouse unit that's going to be built when it eventually gets built, you're told that at the beginning. You understand that. If suddenly, instead of 25 townhomes, we suddenly decide we're going to pop in 140 units a tower, you're really going to flip your lid when you realize you're sharing your driveway with that many people. So, this whole process has to go through a process. The developer has to be able to understand this is the maximum you can ask for, and that's what they've asked for. They've come forward and they've asked for the maximum they can ask for. So to suggest that we would send it back to the developer and see if they'll build more, they'll always build more. They'll build whatever we let them build. But what makes sense and what they've already spent lots of time and money designing, this is what they've spent their time and money designing. Like I said, if we suddenly decide we want to start sprinkling 14-story towers all over town, we can actually do that, but it has to go through the OCP. So we have to hold it up for 2 years, change the OCP, and then allow them to do that. And that's not what we want, and I don't think any neighborhood suddenly wants to have that happen. So I'm going to support this.
All right, Councillor Steves.
I'm going to be joining Councillor Day in opposing this at this time. This is what I was really talking about on the earlier part of the agenda. I was really, really disappointed. We had a chance, for example, at Steveston Community Center to put a couple of floors of seniors housing on it. But some people on the board didn't want seniors living on top of a community center. We've got real problems of where people are going to live. I was chair of the planning committee in 1972 when we developed around this shopping center. We put in the seniors towers. We put in housing for people that had handicaps. That's the very first in Richmond. You could get in and out of a building in a wheelchair. And that was expected to continue. And nothing has happened since. That's 50 years ago. And it's always been this single family, single family, single family. I know that it's hard to convince people to change. But when it takes 50 years to change, that's 50 years too much. And I think we have to start somewhere. What should have happened here is that we should be able to go to people and say, look, your property is worth 10 times as much. You're selling out and you're leaving. Why not sell for a higher price and get some higher density into that neighborhood around that shopping center and go to the other neighbors next to them and say they're leaving and you have the opportunity to do the same, because we're seeing whole neighborhoods leaving. Where I live here in Steveston, every house has changed now in the last 4 years except for 2 bungalows. And the only reason the 2 bungalows are there right along our farm fence, they say, we like your farms, you like your cows, but if you guys go, we're going too. And that's what's happening, folks. Now, we're not intending to leave, so we may have those 2 bungalows there for years. But all the rest of the neighborhood has changed. And I think that people have to recognize that change is coming and that change must come to accommodate the millions of people that we're going to see coming into this region. And it's time we started on it.
Thank you. Councillor Out.
Yeah, Wushu, I want to ask staff a question. Now, if we refer this back for the reason trying to get more new units or space being built, how possible is that? In this proposal, are they already using up the maximum FAR?
Through the chair, perhaps I can deal with that. It is possible. I believe that at the planning committee, the applicant indicated that they wish to move ahead with this existing development. And there's been quite a bit of talk about 2012 and the OCP. I just want to remind council that in fact the arterial road policy, which determines the maximum density and included community consultation, was actually reviewed approximately 2 years ago. So you're not talking about a decades-old planning framework for this.
Good, thank you.
Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be supporting the recommendation. I think when projects take years to come before council, policy is important. Cities have official community plans for a reason. Let's follow them. As the General Manager, Mr. Ersick, just said, the arterial road policy had a major update in 2016 and another review in 2019, which clarified locational guidelines for different types of housing. I believe that this application fits in with the neighborhood. To the north, across Blundell, are single detached homes. To the south, townhouses. And to the west, single detached homes. I can't imagine, and yes, there is a shopping center across the road. I can't imagine putting a 6 or 7 or 8-story building on that corner. What are all the single family homes gonna say? It would be years of consultation. Delays and adding extra costs are not going to help address the affordable housing problem. And also, with regards to the shared driveway, there was quite a bit of discussion at planning, and transportation staff confirmed they have reviewed the plans and it will be able to accommodate the anticipated traffic and fits into the guidelines of the arterial road policy, which had 2 tenants. Densification along minor arterial roads should result in no net increase in the number of driveways to maintain existing traffic flow, and densification along minor arterial roads should result in minimize traffic disruption by eliminating driveways along arterial roads. So I think this project fits in. I think it sends a bad signal to the development community about whether they should bother taking a chance on any type of development when we turn down applications that meet all the criteria that were in place when they applied. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, just one last question of staff. When was this application originated?
Through Your Worship to Your Worship, 2018.
Okay. Now, Councillor Hobbs, you have your hand up. Didn't you speak?
Yeah, Your Worship, I thought I had my hand up, so I just put it up. Thank you.
So you haven't spoken?
I haven't spoken.
Please, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much, and through you, Your Worship. You know, it's easy for us to sit here and say things like things could be better or we can do more. And that's true. Things can always be better and we can always do more. But what I've learned so far in a short time on council is that good development, good parks, good schools is always preceded by good policy, good analysis, and good planning. So it concerns me a little bit when we get off on tangents of whataboutism, or this could be better, or if we only did this. So just to clarify, in my own mind, what we're doing is replacing 6 single-family lots with 25 townhouses. They're not going to be cheap. Nothing is cheap anymore. But the single-family lots there now are probably, I mean, even in any neighborhood, they're 1.5, 1.6 million. So these ones very much, they could be 2 million. They're rented right now. So these townhomes will either, they'll be bought and they'll either be occupied by the owner or occupied by somebody that rents them as a market rental. Is that the perfect solution that we all want for every development? No. But the important thing too is that when we make decisions and make rules, I believe that they should be based on what our policy and what our rules say. And I think you'd appreciate that in your life if you were doing something that didn't get changed when you're halfway through or at the end of the process, whatever it is you're doing in life. You like to know what the rules are ahead of it. So with this particular development, for instance, $250,000 going into the Affordable Housing Reserve might not sound like a lot to some people. It's a lot to me. And when it accumulates with other contributions from other developments, it actually is used for some very significant things like the Stories building or Kiwanis. And I'd like staff to just comment on how it is that that amount of money, when it accumulates, is leveraged to build very strategic, purpose-built affordable housing units for seniors. Can you comment on that?
Through your worship to Councillor Hobbs, I'll tackle that one, and Cody may wish to add to it. Yes, the cash in lieu contributions for affordable housing that we collect from the smaller projects are accumulated and then often applied to fund large projects which contain subsidised housing. So we're talking about housing with rent levels well below the Lima rate. And the money that the city contributes into those projects, and in addition to the city-owned sites, is matched by senior government, usually the provincial government. And so the city can leverage the funds that it puts into the project by 4, 5, 6, or 7 times that amount of funding from senior levels of government. So that's the value of not always taking bricks and mortar, but actually taking cash in lieu as well.
Thank you. And I'll admit right now, I had nothing to do with that affordable housing reserve because I'm new on council. But I'll give credit to people that were here before that put it in place because I think you get very good results from that fund. And I'm a big fan of it. And I wouldn't want to see it disappear. So when it comes to changing the rules of the road when you're already 3/4 of the way down or 90%, to think that there can be no negative impact of that is maybe a mistaken belief. And I'll just point to the hole in number 3 road called the atmosphere site. That's a big hole in the ground. Who knows how long that's going to be there? And it's there for different reasons. It's not exactly like this, but the point is development can be unsuccessful. And you can see that on number 3 road if you have a look at it. So there is no guarantee, even when the OCP review is done, there's no guarantee whatsoever what that review will say. It doesn't mean that what will be built at number 2 in Blundell will be any different than what's proposed today. That's not a guarantee. So I would just say that there isn't a cookie cutter approach. No one development is going to solve all the housing needs that we have in Richmond or Metro Vancouver or Canada for that matter. I'll say one thing to you, Canada is last in the G7 countries for homes per 1,000 people. Last in the G7. We're 1.8 million homes short. That's a continuum of housing types. It's not just one type. This is part of it. So I would say that in closing, when we apply our rules, our bylaws, our regulations, it's important that we be fair. And from my experience in life, one of the most important ways to be fair is to be consistent, no matter what you're dealing with. Treat people consistently, that includes developers, and it includes everybody. Treat them fairly, treat them consistently, and in this case, that means I'll be supporting this item. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor McNulty, to wrap up.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I will be supporting this. A lot has been said. It's rather interesting. Some of the discussion, the talk of increasing density, you know, we've never ever given additional density and turned somebody back and say, yeah, you might get 5 more units or whatever. But as soon as you increase density, you bring in the NIMBY concept. In order for this development, Your Worship, I just calculated, you'd have to go from 0.7 to 2.5 or 3. That would mean anywhere from 3 stories to 8 to 10 to 12 stories to make it profitable for the developer. I wonder about those people sitting in the adjacent to this, whether they like that in their backyard. I would guarantee the whole audience would fill us up and protesting, say, not in my backyard, to have this. Unfortunately, we have to be realistic, and as it was mentioned earlier, Your Worship, we're following our policy. The other thing that's really interesting, we keep tacking on things, and we keep talking about affordable housing. And who pays for it at the end? The person at the end, the couple that has only $90,000 to put down on a $400,000 or $600,000 townhouse, Your Worship, and the townhouse goes up to $650,000, so they don't have $92,000 or $93,000, and the bank says, sorry, you don't qualify for the mortgage. So they don't get it. So, I mean, we've got to be realistic with what we're doing on here. I'm not, you know, I can say I'm pro-development, but I'm also realistic that we've got to look at each one in its case by case to see what we can do with it. You know, if the vote tonight was to send this back and have a density of 3, yeah, we're going to put a tower there, 15 stories. We're going to get 400 units. No problem. I'd be interested in considering that. But that isn't going to happen, and it's never happened. It's the popular thing to knock things. And, you know, it's really interesting. It's great to knock everything we've done. And I think Mr. Hobbs mentioned earlier, yeah, we put in the arterial road policy. A number of us were around from that. It wasn't popular to start with. Yeah, we put in a number of policies. And I think we've got to go on it. We can't backtrack on it. I'm hoping with the OCP study, we will make some changes. We'll put in subsidized housing, LMARs, et cetera, Your Worship, on this. It was mentioned earlier, we never built the Kiwanis. We gave Kiwanis $19 million because we took cash in lieu along the way. We gave in Stories over $10 million to build Stories for all the people there. We have TICFA, we have Addictions in there, we have a number of other groups in there, Your Worship, that otherwise they'd be on the street and be homeless. So we you know, that's where we got the money, is from that. And I'll never support housing in our parks. I'll never take the green space and build houses in parks. It's not where we fight and we work very hard, Your Worship, and spend millions and millions of dollars a year to get parkland for future generations and the current population. And we can't move to start putting in the parks, although I disagree with my colleague, who I respect. But this one fits in, and as a result it fits in, and I don't want to see the developer change and go on. Let's get a good development out of it, etc. The atmosphere, was mentioned, has had 3 changes in ownership, and nobody knows what they're going to do with it yet. Maybe we'll end up filling the hole up and nothing will happen there. I don't know. So, Your Worship, I think we should support this, move it to public hearing, and hear for the folks around the place and let them have a shot at it.
All right, so Councillor Day, you want to refer this back? Do you want to
Yes.
move that?
I do, and I've got more information if I can.
Move, is it moved? And is it seconded?
Yeah.
It's moved and seconded, go ahead.
Yeah, so if council could just go look at the map on CNCL 259, you'll see very clearly that just a short distance away from this subject property is apartments, and they're quite tall. There's also community institution, also located just past that. And if we just take a moment to think about the development that we approved at Williams and number 3. So that again is close to a shopping center.
This is on merits of referral.
Yeah, because if we could do what we did at number 3 in Williams, it's worth sending back. We've got apartments above shops with the parking and whatnot in the back. If we orientate the higher density towards the road, towards number 2 road, we can have green space in the back so we do not negatively impact the neighborhood behind, just like we did at Williams and number 3.
Councillor, merits of referral.
The merits of referral is we've done it before, let's do it again, Williams and number 3. I'm just saying we should do the same thing.
Okay, so on referral, I think we've all spoken about that. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? And those opposed? All right, so it was Councillor Day, Councillor Wolf, Councillor Steves in favor. Harold, you were in favor?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Those 3 in favor, the rest of council was opposed, it's defeated. So then, on the main question, I'll call the question, all those in favor? Those opposed? It's carried with the same 3 councillors opposed, Steves, Day, Wolf. All right, so that brings us to public delegation on non-agenda items. As I say, there's only one of these. May I have a motion to resolve in the committee of the whole to hear delegation on non-agenda items? All those in favor, opposed, carried. So we'll go back to Jasmine Piao to delegate on proof of vaccination requirements in the city. So again, introduce yourself on this subject. You've got 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. My name is Jasmine. I am a Richmond resident. My postal code is V6X3W2. Last Monday, on March 21st, the City of Richmond announced on a Facebook post that City Hall has reopened but requires proof of vaccination to receive in-person counter services. The city website, when I checked, stated this information as well. According to the BC Public Health Order on proof of vaccination, it does not state that government buildings are subject to proof of vaccination. Other local municipalities do not ask for proof of vaccination for City Hall entry, including the City of Vancouver, the City of Burnaby, and the City of Surrey, from the ones I checked. After speaking with city staff, I was notified that the City of Richmond used the authority given through municipal jurisdiction to make this decision. Additionally, to my knowledge, Council endorsed this decision in a closed Council meeting. Some of the questions that I have regarding this, and then I will come back to some more comments. My questions for Council: what legislation points to the authority with municipality jurisdiction to decide on health protocols for entry requirements to City Hall? Please confirm if there was any consultation with the local health authority regarding the decision to require proof of vaccination for entry into City Hall. Was any public consultation conducted with Richmond residents who are directly impacted by this decision? And I would like to also add some more comments. So currently with this decision, the City of Richmond would be going beyond the scope of the BC Public Health Order and is denying entry and services to city facilities to law-abiding residents and taxpayers. So I believe this is an urgent issue and should be remedied as soon as possible. The City of Richmond, while deciding to require proof of vaccination outside of the public health guidance, is still using the provincial proof of vaccination system in City Hall and city facilities to restrict access to tax-funded city services and recreation programs. In implementing proof of vaccination, whether for City Hall or for city facilities, I would like to note respectfully, council members and city staff are not licensed as medical professionals and are not qualified to tell the public to get a medical intervention in order to receive city services and participate in city recreation programs. The city, by asking for proof of vaccination, whether it's the staff asking members of the public or the council and administration asking city staff for disclosing their personal medical information, this would be a violation of medical privacy according to the Privacy Act of BC by compelling for this information. The city would be coercing residents and members of the public to take a medical intervention in order to receive services and participate in recreation programs, which violates the principles of informed consent as outlined in the Healthcare Consent Act and Facility Admission Act of BC. I'd like to remind respectfully that every council member has taken an oath of office. The council has a responsibility to serve in integrity and defend the fundamental human rights in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms of its residents and the members of public. I want to also speak on the human experience with proof of vaccination. Also, we can call it a medical apartheid system. Proof of vaccination requirements prevents residents from fully participating in society because of their personal medical decision. I believe in medical choice, that everyone has the right to informed consent to decide on the medical interventions that they participate in. All Richmond residents and families have a right to informed consent and to fully live and play in the city. Access for residents to swim, skate, watch hockey games, dance, and participate in other recreation programs with their children and loved ones is for every single resident in this city. We have seen with the proof of vaccination requirements in the city has incited fear, division, and segregation among the Richmond community. I was born and raised in Richmond. Richmond is my home. I have seen it's almost become unrecognizable with the division that I've seen with the proof of vaccination requirements. Families and friends have unspoken or spoken divisions about personal medical choices. I've seen children lose countless hours of opportunities, crucial opportunities for play and social growth. their customers being refused at small businesses and restaurants, small businesses struggling to continue to find opportunities due to these proof of vaccination restrictions, mental health crises due to stress and anxiety of whether loss of employment due to mandates or social exclusion, or having just a simple decision in their personal medical choices that may be disagreed upon by others. And this is all due to the rejection of one personal medical choice. And these are some of the first-hand experiences of Richmond residents that they're going through.
You've now had 5 minutes. Please finish up.
Okay. So my calls for action for council is to repeal the City Hall entry proof of vaccination requirements, advocate for Richmond residents to the Provincial Ministry of Health for the mistreatment, discrimination, and harms caused by the proof of vaccination requirements, and implement tax exemptions and tax adjustments through bylaws to Richmond residents impacted by the proof of vaccination requirements. Thank you.
So I will answer some of your questions. The decisions were made in closed meeting. So we cannot comment on that at all. Because it, excuse me. I'm talking to this delegation.
We're talking here?
No, I'm sorry, you're not. I am speaking. Okay. All right. Have we finished, or are you going to let me speak? Okay? We don't speak about what happens in a closed meeting. Secondly,
Why not?
the mask mandate has been dropped.
Closed meeting, why closed meeting? That's not democracy.
All right, may I have a motion to rise and report?
Yes.
Second, moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Korea, no democracy.
Okay, that is carried. All right, thank you very much, ma'am. I tried to talk to you, and they don't let me talk to
You're
you.
talking about closed door meetings.
Okay.
That's not
Okay.
democracy, that's not Canada.
Thank-
Put your hand up, put your hand up.
Thank you.
That doesn't.
Thank you.
Closed door meeting,
Thank
can you
you.
please explain to us? We don't know what that is. We have a right to know.
Thank you.
You
I'm,
haven't answered our question.
we are now out of committee. Thank you, ma'am. You are finished.
You understand English? What's a closed door
Let us
meeting?
know. We've been sitting here for almost 2.5 hours.
Well, you're
We
throwing
live in
out
Richmond. We're raising our families here. We have a right to know. What is a closed door meeting?
Freemasonic.
Thank you.
Jasmine, for
Freemasonic meeting.
Okay, excuse me. I'm not going to have a town hall meeting here.
I don't care what you want.
Okay.
We don't care.
Thank you very much.
We don't care what you want. Who do you think you want?
Councillor Day, you have a point. What is it?
Could I ask that we take a
peasants in the middle of the
recess?
word?
And maybe we could talk to the people in a recess and try to explain why we,
I'm trying to explain to the people and they won't let me.
but maybe a short recess just to allow
Oh,
staff to explain?
No, we can speak to them afterwards, okay? We're not going to call a recess when we don't have respect for the rules and decorum and the traditions in this city hall, in our council chambers. I insist on it. Ma'am, thank you. You are excused. So that brings us,
Councilor Bill, it seems like you want to say something. Can you please answer my question?
okay,
What is closed door meeting?
thank you.
I would really appreciate to have my.
Sorry?
I would really appreciate to have my questions answered, as
Ma'am?
it's really important.
Okay, I'm going to tell you. Decisions were made at a closed meeting. It's determined under the community charter what can be determined in a closed meeting. The results and the procedure and the process in a closed meeting is not public. That's why it's called a closed meeting, okay? Now do you want to hear what the rules are? Because I can tell you what they are. No, I don't want to hear from anybody out there. I'm talking to her.
Sorry, could you clarify on the rules that you?
Do you want to know the rules around the vaccination and the masks and all that?
If you could clarify, and then I can.
Okay, the mask mandate has been dropped. As of April 8th, the requirement for vaccination passport, proof of vaccination is being dropped. And in terms of the mandates to this point. While the public health officer has dropped certain requirements in terms of the vaccination, proof of vaccination, it's up to the individual enterprise as to what their rules are. So we have followed and are following the rules which have a vaccination certification until April the 8th. Okay?
If I may respond to that, so with I understand
No,
that it's being
ma'am,
lifted.
we're not-
However.
We're not discussing it. Okay, I gave you the courtesy to tell you the rules.
Thank you very much for that.
Okay,
I
thank
appreciate
you.
that. But
And
I'm just gonna
no,
say,
no,
just saying following the public
Ma'am,
health orders
ma'am.
is the same thing that was said in the Nuremberg trials after World War II.
Thank you,
Not a good enough
thank you.
excuse to
Thank
explain
you.
for the violation for
Okay,
that.
thank you.
Thank you.
What is your justification of moving into a closed-door meeting? In
Um,
an open government,
this-
everything can be closed door.
All right.
We don't need a government anymore, right? They're worried about Ukraine.
All right,
We just need to.
let's go to bylaws for adoption.
They're worried about Ukraine, look what we have here.
So you can have every meeting closed door.
Look at what we have here.
Okay,
But we're worried about Ukraine.
okay.
What's the
Please.
justification for closed-door meetings?
I'll take a motion on the bylaws for adoption.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are 4 bylaws for final adoption. The first 3 have no noted opposition from the current council, and the 4th bylaw has opposition.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. And on the final one? Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried with Councillor Wolf opposed. Development Permit Panel.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are 2 recommendations for council. Recommendation 1, that the minutes of the Development Permit Panel meeting held on March 16th, 2022, and the Chair's report for the Development Permit Panel meetings held on August 11th, 2021, be received for information, and that the recommendations of the panel to authorize the issuance of a development permit for the property located at 5740, 5760, and 5800 Mineru Boulevard be endorsed and the permit so issued.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. And so can we have a seconder for adjournment? All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. We are now adjourned.